Discussing some letters that Captain Gannon wrote to the S3 in 3-7 in the March and April time frame of 2004 when Lima Company went over to OIF2. And for some of the more important issues, we're going to try to talk about the date and the issue and the background comment that Lieutenant or Captain Neal has for us. And with that,
yep. Okay. Here's the first letter, which is March 15th. We just taken over transition of authority was complete as of March 13th, if I remember. Some of the things that we've had problems with was with cross-boundary coordination. Being that initially we were the only firm base that was going to be established out there. Ours was the first priority to get built up, then Kilo companies over at the water treatment facility. Well, with that in mind, just like any mission, you see Neal7a as it being the main effort. There's always going to be those kind of wandering hands or wandering eyes that want to go in there and see what's going on. Well, initially going into a zone, everyone knows, where the zone boundaries are established on the map, but actually being able to walk them on the ground and physically see it, there are going to be issues with that.
Can you point out the general area that we have a map here in the general area that Lima Company was deployed in, and where some of the boundaries were?
The major zone boundary that basically connected us from Zone West to Zone East was basically this line here comes across, and where the arches are, it splits. So this road here essentially splits here, and we used to call this the HK triangle because it was Neal7a and Carabela would kind of like intermix in there, and just a lot of suspicious activity. Then you went up further north and there was the shelf, and the shelf or the Euphrates River, that's where pretty much our boundary was. And then you go down south, maybe 2 clicks, and that was our southernmost boundary, that's where ASR Ruby was, this being ASR Jade coming into Route Market, Route East End, Route Train, and then Route West End. And of course, you got the Syrian border, which is our furthermost western boundary. This is a very interesting one here, is that they call this no man's land, and it's called no man's land because Iraq will actually think that they own no man's land, while Syria thinks they own no man's land. And later on in our operations, that kind of comes to bite us in the rear as one of our cap patrols went into no man's land and Syria opened up. That's another segue. But with this, initially, not knowing where the boundaries are, not being too comfortable, familiar with where the boundaries are, we were getting, ODA was coming in, OGA would show up, maybe a Kilo unit here and there would pop in, not come up on the net because they good on the unit to maybe want to cut across so make it seems like there's a seamless boundary. But every now and then something like that would occur where they wouldn't coordinate, a unit wouldn't coordinate with us to let us know that they were in zone. Every now and then LAR has done something. Kilo, for the most part, has helped out. But it's like OGA once again. It's CIA has been an issue, or MPs, because they got to do constant runs into, into the cities to get the local security forces and whatnot. But they need to let us know what's going on. Kilo 6 was real good at getting on the hook beforehand. LAR was, but LAR never really did come into our city. ODA every now and then, like I said, it's those secret squirrel kind of like guys. Every now and then they would do it.
And you mentioned a little earlier when we were discussing this that because we're so far out west, no one really paid attention to us. Can you say a little about that?
Yeah, well, initially, I mean, there's a lot of comments and there's a lot of thought process in behind that. Number one, initially, we thought the reason why the West was just so volatile or was uncontrollable was because we felt that the Army was in the Bradleys and they weren't getting out, they weren't dismounting. And one of the, I guess, observations that I've made of the Army, I think a lot of my peers have made of the Army, is that they're very standoffish or whatnot. You know, they want to build the fortress and create that gap in between them and the local populace. As Marines, we're not like that. We're definitely very in your face, very personable. You know, we want to be on the ground because that's how we better feel we can assess the situation. So everyone was under the impression that, being that we had such a successful time in Karbala, we'd go to, you know, Western Al-Anbar province, Al-Qaim, and we'd essentially get the same kind of results. That's number one. Number two, Fallujah was still, you know, and Muhammadiyah and those areas were still the very hotbed. You know, it's the Sunni triangle. So naturally, it being the Sunni triangle, it being a very, very critical, you know, piece of ground, the media is going to focus there, and a lot, you know, the division is going to pull out of its focus there as well. That's going to make or break, you know, apparently how it's going to affect the rest of Al-Anbar province. And essentially, it does. You know, anything that would happen in Fallujah, it would somewhat occur, you know, maybe 2 to 3 days or maybe even 3 weeks later. No more than 3 weeks, maybe no less than 3 days later. So if you knew that something was about to brew in Fallujah, you could pretty much guarantee that something similar to that, maybe not the magnitude, but it was going to brew down and, you know, down to other AOs. I mean, you know, yes, Fallujah had a lot of activity, but look at, you know, the Marines in 2-4, you know, they were definitely having a rough go at it, and then, you know, then there's us.
Can you move on and describe the overall op order that William and Company operated under during this period?
Yeah, the initial op order that we have basically set the tempo of what we were going to do over there. It gave us our task organization, what we were comprised of. We knew that already from the get-go. Then Captain Gannon had a terrain model built in Kuwait and sat us all down. We were organically, we kept our weapons platoon intact, 3 rifle platoons. Of course, we had the headquarters platoon and all that stuff, but we had a combat service support platoon. We had 1 CAT platoon. We had a platoon minus the snipers, and also we got direct support down there in DS. You know, we had Force Recon. They might as well have been attached because they lived with us for quite some time. In the CSS platoon, you know, had a truck platoon, a medical platoon, transport section, or motor T, you know, section, a film mess section, and an armory section. So all these bits and pieces, and then eventually we got tracks and tanks and all that. It ends up being like this 350 to 450 man company. But
what was your expectations about the enemy situation before the heavy operations began in the middle of March?
Initially, I honestly thought it was going to be like a Karbala. I thought it was going to be okay, we might see some contact, we might take mortar, heck, we took mortar attacks in Karbala. Not a lot. Not to the magnitude where we're getting one, you know, every single day or every other day, you know, for 7 straight months. But we had 2 indirect fire attacks in Karbala. So I honestly thought that's what it was going to be like. I thought the Army built that standoff approach and that we're going to have to close that gap. And once we close the gap, things were relatively going to stabilize out.
What was the commander's intent for that initial op order?
Initial op order, number one, force protection is always first and foremost. Number two, gain support. Gain support and gain support in the confidence of the local populace. Find the enemy, kill him, amongst other things, and set the conditions so that the